country. Don't you know? Don't you know?
Alright, so here we go with the thrust only vehicle on the left and the four-wheel drive only car in green and the four-wheel drive plus thrust car on the right. And up under, I'm just saying basically the thrust only car is kind of going to be a racing only category going into the future to infinity. And the four-wheel drive, it will exist in all categories as it does now. You know, people drive cars, commute in wheel-driven cars and race four-wheel drive wheel-driven cars. It's everywhere. But as we continue forward, it will fade and continue to be around into infinity forever. And the new four-wheel drive plus thrust, I guess they've been around from 2012, 2013 on YouTube to now, and it will be in all categories into infinity from now, but mostly racing. It'll be a mostly racing category for these vehicles, purely because on flat ground and in dry areas it's going to be more efficient and just not needed to put thrust on the vehicles, kind of. For example, like the way a boosted board and Casey Neistat can cruise around New York most of the year with just wheel-driven power and not great tires with skateboard wheels. It just works. Willpower works, but as the series has discussed, it's limited in certain ways and it can't be the fastest in a lot of different ways. So in racing, and where speed is king, it's going to start to exist. And then in more extreme situations, you're going to see it start to exist. But for everyday, normal kind of cars and commutes, wheel-driven cars and four-wheel drive type cars, two-wheel drive cars even, will stay commonplace. For price, they're going to be the cheapest. Why two-wheel drive is cheaper than four-wheel drive, and four-wheel drive is going to be cheaper than four-wheel drive with thrust. And the kind of pros and cons will kind of keep most people into a four-wheel drive only or wheel-driven only spectrum. Now, the thrust only is kind of like, well, why should it only be racing and things like that? Well, basically, it should only be racing because in efficient and large thrust amounts, well, not efficient and large, but you can't be efficient and have large thrust amounts and say to move a given weight. It's just simpler to talk about like moving a 200-pound person. Willpower can do it a lot easier, and to move them with thrust, say if you could have 100 pounds of thrust, for example, you would be disturbing the environment around you more to move the person, right? Your 100 pounds of thrust is going to be blowing all kind of leaves and dirt and rocks and possibly people, and blowing dirt on the people, blowing other cars, other commuters. So if you're talking about trying to power a bus or car with thrust only, you'd be creating so much thrust. The sound would be ridiculous for one, and then the thrust alone and the pushing of the wind on things would be ridiculous. On the other hand, you literally would blow people down the street and things. So thrust only vehicles will really for the most part be limited to racing only. And like when people want to have like small personal vehicles, they could choose to have a thrust only personal vehicle, maybe a thrust only motorcycle, maybe a thrust only ATV, maybe a thrust only scooter, a thrust only skateboard. Small personal things like that will be more manageable as far as sound and, you know, thrust and damage to surrounding areas, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's basically what's up with that. Alright, so here we are with the sum up. Basically, so thrust only cars are going to be in the racing realm only from now to infinity, and only grow but sticking in the racing realm. But generally, their lack of speed or their problems with bad efficiency are going to hold them back. And the four-wheel drive only car exists always, but will fade, but be around forever. But it's going to be slow on ice, going to be slow in hill climbs, and it can't fly. And the thrust car, basically its main drawback only is going to be cost, and then problems, being kind of maybe more brittle, maybe more prone to breaking because it has more parts. Things like that are going to be up on it. Then the thrust only car is going to be loud. It's just going to be loud. That's going to be a problem. Four-wheel drive plus thrust car is going to be loud too, but only when the EDF is on and has to be on, and it doesn't have to be on all the time. And that's how the four-wheel drive plus thrust car gets around the efficiency problem and all that. It doesn't have to have its thrust on when it's not needed. And then the four-wheel drive only car, ice tires do a pretty decent job in things when you're on slick conditions or on ice or in things like that, or in the snow. You can have studded or spiked tires, kind of like cleats and things like that, spikes for your tires. But they're really bad for the road. They're bad for the laid roads and freeways and asphalt and things like that. So they can help on one hand, but then they're really bad on the other hand. They're going to tear up the surface they're driving on a lot more. So then that's more cost for the city and for the people in another way. And the four-wheel drive plus thrust, it can save the roads and save the tires a little bit more, because it can use the thrust instead of needing to spike its tires and go to drastic measures with its tires and things like that. So last but not least, the future of racing continuing, like the far future, the thrust only cars are going to have a huge amount of growth, and I think the most growth in the racing realm in the far future. This is going to be due to battery technology increasing, materials increasing, and all these things combined is going to provide really high power to weight ratios, and the EDF and thrust only cars are just going to get better and better and faster as the tech and autopilot technologies for vectoring and everything just improves. The four-wheel drive only cars, as we've seen in the past, we will continue to see evolution and progress there, but it'll just be less growth in the four-wheel drive and wheel-driven realms only, and that's gonna kind of be due to traction of wheels and the physics of wheels and materials. I believe we'll see development in all the same areas and materials and things like that. So even tire technology and how sticky rubber is, and maybe even road technology will get better, but traction will always limit wheel power in a major way. So that's going to be a problem for it in the far future. And last but not least, the four-wheel drive plus thrust is going to be second only to thrust in the far future. And I kind of think the four-wheel drive plus thrust, though, if it's second to the thrust only vehicles in the really far future, it's only going to be by a super small amount, because if thrust is playing out to be the dominant force, with super advanced batteries and super advanced motors and thrust and materials and things like that, well then the four-wheel drive plus thrust car could actually just run less powerful wheel setups, so it's not held back by a heavy wheel motor or heavy tires or heavy battery to power the wheels. It could just run an extremely light one, for the small times that wheel power still might be able to give you like an advantage in the far future when thrust is just boom jetting you off the line with the same amount of thrust like you're in kind of a Star Wars movie or something. But yeah, that's kind of this video, and until the next one, you guys have a good one. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Have fun, keep doing your stuff, evolve, push yourself. Peace.
In the country.